As a sector, we're doing youth engagement work and exploring some of the challenges that it presents. So I'm Naomi Fuller, I'm Communications Manager at Avon Wildlife Trust. We're one of the Natural History Consortium partners. We are working to protect wildlife and inspire people to connect with nature across the west of England, and we are one of 46 wildlife trusts. There are other trusts represented at the conference here today. Just a really quick explanation of how the session's going to run. I'm going to do a really brief bit of context about Avon Wildlife Trust youth engagement work. And then there's going to be a chance to hear from my colleague, who I'll introduce in a minute, but George Cook, who is part of our youth team at the Trust. And he's going to be talking about the Communicate Plus conference, which was mentioned earlier by Matt, but which ran here at the zoo on Monday evening. And there'll be a short film about that. We're then going to hear some insights from our guest speaker, Jenny Thatcher from Friends of the Earth. And then the last part of this session, we'll actually be moving into the room next door. There'll be a chance for some discussion in groups, in informal groups, about really focusing on 4 key kind of prompt questions and themes. So there's a chance to share views and experiences, and then in the last 10-15 minutes we'll come back into this room and share feedback, and there'll be a chance to ask questions of Jenny and George. Okay, so first just a really brief bit of content about the context about the work that Avon Wildlife Trust does with young people. Our work focuses on 3 key areas, so that's restoring nature, building nature's recovery at landscape scale. For us, obviously, that's across the west of England region. Secondly, around inspiring people and communities to take action for nature. And thirdly, it's all around championing the value of nature through raising our voice about wildlife and the natural world and enabling others to do the same. So we run a range of practical placements, courses, work experience opportunities and projects supporting young people between the ages of 11 and 24 to learn new skills, take action for wildlife and start to raise their voice on environmental issues. The outcomes we're working to with young people are focused on helping them to deepen their connection with nature, to develop practical, useful skills and experience, to actively improve the green spaces within their community and across our region, and finally to act as catalysts for change in the environment and again back in their own communities. And all of our youth work is part of Our Bright Future, which is a really ambitious partnership led by the Wildlife Trust nationally, which brings together both the youth and environment sectors. It's a £33 million long-term programme funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. There are 31 separate projects right around the UK, and again, all aimed at young people between 11 and 24. So already this year, in 2019, Avon Wildlife Trust, we've worked with more than 700 young people on lots of different projects, and you know it's difficult to kind of sum up in a few minutes, but I just picked out a few that I thought were really useful to share. So all of last month, during October, George and his team worked with young people within their schools and colleges on a mass wildflower and bulb planting project. So altogether, they managed to plant 1,000 wildflowers and bulbs in their school grounds, creating wildlife-rich spaces where they were often quite neglected and nature-depleted areas within their schools. So we called that whole month-long project Bulbtober, and the young people really liked the idea of it being a kind of, you know, a kind of campaign that they were running that had a really practical element to it, and they talked a lot about how they really enjoyed making a physical difference to their school grounds, and commented quite a lot, in fact, about how schools really vary in the quality of the space that they have for nature and for the well-being of the young people who are there. Another project which we ran this year with a group of sixth form students in Clevedon was around, it sort of married their skills in their design and technology classes with coming out to one of our nature reserves where they learned about barn owls. We had some extremely dilapidated barn owl nesting boxes that were literally kind of on their last legs, falling down. And we had breeding pairs of barn owls that we knew were using that nature reserve. So we took the young people out to the reserve. It was only about 4 miles, 3-4 miles from their school, but they'd never seen this nature reserve. It's a really beautiful wetland reserve and an amazing habitat for barn owls. So they learnt how, we gave them support, they learnt how to actually build and design new barn owl boxes to a really kind of clear specification. They worked over several weeks really hard building some really beautiful boxes and then came back to the nature reserve with us to install them. And so they felt really connected with this space. There were lots of comments about how they were they wanted to come back and see the barn owls hunting at the right time of year. They learnt a huge amount about barn owl ecology and behaviour, and they felt really proud that they had this physical thing, this new nesting boxes that they'd built. And I love the fact that they'd actually written, new home messages to the owls. And so they put them up with messages from them in the barn owl boxes. But I think it's just a really good example of how that kind of personal connection really helps to kind of motivate and unlock some curiosity as well. So that was another project that we ran this year. And we also took a group of young people to a Westminster lobbying event, which was part of our collective Wildlife Trust Wilder Future campaign around environmental change and calling for a Strong Environment Act. But that was a chance for young people to meet their local MPs for the first time and have some face-to-face conversation and a chance to express what environmental changes they themselves want to see. And our youth engagement journey, is evolving and continuing. We've just this week launched a youth forum for the first time, a forum for young people to be closer to the core of our organisation and we hope influence things. But as I said, that's just launched this week and it's very much a journey that we're on. I've mentioned Communicate Plus. I was here for some of that on Monday evening. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague George for him to say a bit more about the event and what that highlighted. So George is Communications and Engagement Officer at the Trust, working in the team which directly runs our programme of youth volunteering opportunities. So over to you, George.
Hello everybody, is this on? Fantastic. So yeah, my name's George Cook and as Naomi said, I'm a Communications and Engagement Officer at Avon Wildlife Trust. And yeah, I'm heavily involved with the Our Bright Future project, do a lot of work with young people all across the region. But for the past few months, my work's been heavily leading towards Communicate Plus, which ran on Monday night right here at the zoo. So we welcomed over 85 young people from 8 different schools for 4 hours here at the zoo. And the main purpose of this event was to give these young people a space to chat and learn and discuss the environmental issues that were of most concern to them. So it had the same theme as this conference, Communicate, so it did have a behaviour change focus. So we wanted young people to get together, discuss these issues that were concerning them and then learn how they can take those ideas forward and design a behaviour change campaign that they can take back into their own communities, whether that's just chatting to their friends or their families or their peers or into their school. So it was a conference for 11 to 14-year-olds, and when you're planning an event like this, you're trying to get the young people involved as much as possible right from the start. So we went back and looked at our evaluation and our feedback data that we'd gathered from all our young volunteers from the past 12 months. So we had 150 young people's feedback about what was concerning them in regards to the environment, and from that we got the big 3 topics, which were plastics was way out there at number 1, then the climate crisis and also green spaces for wildlife. So we knew that this conference had to address those issues. There's no point talking about things that the young people don't find interesting. We also wanted them involved in how the evening would run and what they wanted from an event like Communicate Plus. So we ran workshops and sessions for our young volunteers and for our newly formed youth forum, and we got their ideas about what they wanted to see from the event. And from that, we found out they wanted it to be interactive. They didn't want to just be sat down all night. They wanted to be up and doing things. They wanted the speakers to be young themselves, so we incorporated that in. And they wanted it to be like a safe space where they'd feel comfortable asking questions and being able to share their ideas. So we did have a session led by my colleague from the Wildlife Trust, who did a very interactive session about how to connect people with nature and how you can use that to then change people's one-off actions. So they were all running around in the Clifton Street just here, picking up objects from nature and seeing how they could describe how that made them feel through a variety of different senses and emotions, which is good to see. We did have a variety of young speakers. So our youth forum, we had about 7 people here on the night, and they were introducing all the speakers, they were asking questions, and they also facilitated the workshop as well. So it's really good to see them so heavily involved on the evening. And they also said about wanting to share their ideas. So we did have a question and answer session to start off. And although no one wanted to say the first question, once that was out of the way, the questions were coming really freely, and they did feel comfortable to ask the questions. And I'll talk a little bit about it later on. Some of the questions that they were coming up with were really profound and inspiring. In regards to those 3 topics that they wanted to hear about, the plastics, the climate crisis, and green space for wildlife, we had 3 speakers, each give a little 5-minute introduction to get everyone in the room up to the same level. So we had a researcher who studied microplastics summarise the plastic problem. We had someone from the Woodlands Trust come in and talk about green spaces in Bristol, and then we had an activist from the school strike movement come in and do a bit on climate change, how she got involved with that movement as well. So from organising an event like Communicate Plus, it got me thinking a lot about some of the problems and things that come along with planning an event for young people. Firstly, some of the things I thought about was that the demand is there for these events. So I said we had about 85 young people here, but more schools wanting to come, a lot more. I think we probably could have had another like 5 or 6 schools coming to the event. So that was really positive. Like, there is now a demand for these events. That might be from the year we've just had with Greta and the school strikes movement. Schools do want these sort of events, and they will come. That's really positive. The feedback from the night was all positive. Everyone seemed to have a really good time. The teachers all enjoyed themselves and thought the kids did great. There was a load of great ideas. Yeah, I mentioned already that the questions that some of the kids were asking was so good. One in particular, this young girl was saying she wants to start making these environmental and ethical choices, but she lives with her parents, and how can you best approach your parents to make these changes for the household and the family, which was really interesting. Someone else said to the 3 speakers who did the 5-minute provocations, said if you were to talk to government right now and you wanted them to do one thing about your problem, what would it be? And it was really good to hear these great questions. It made me also think about how we can integrate Communicate Plus with this conference better in the future. It's good that I get to talk about it now. We've got a great video to show you in a moment, but all these young people are so switched on, they care so much. I don't see any reason why we can't get some of them here, actually at the event. They care as much as we do, and it's really important that that integration improves. So if we can get them next year, have some of them maybe doing this to Bowes Beach next year, I think that would be great. And it also got me thinking about the language that we're using when we're talking about youth work. I kept referring to the lady from the school strikes movement as a youth activist, and I was like, do I need to even say that? She's just an activist, she just happens to be young. I kept thinking about, do I call it a youth conference or a conference for young people? Does it matter? They just happen to be conferences, they just happen to be younger than we are. And then I kept referring to this conference as the main conference and Communicate Plus as the youth conference. And again, I kept trying to catch myself out there, like, again, they're just 2 conferences, we are just older. And again, I found myself like almost underestimating the level that these young people care about this issue. We did have a lecturer from Bath University, and he was also concerned as well about speaking to 11-year-olds. That's a lot younger than he normally lectures to. And at the last session of the night, the feedback, Simon Garrett was here and getting them to say one thing they take away from the night, and it was amazing to see how many of them were really engaged with that session from that lecture about the psychology of breaking people's habits, and they had all got it, they had learnt it and really were interested in it, so that was great to see. So now I'm going to show you a little video that was filmed during the night from the UE students that are doing a Masters in Wildlife Filmmaking. So they filmed the event on Monday evening and then they've edited it all together to show now on Wednesday morning. So thank you very much for that. It's no mean feat. So yeah, here we go.
It was nice to see the passion in the people.
So tonight we have our second ever Communicate Plus conference, which is inviting secondary school students from across the Bristol region to join us to discuss the latest in environmental communications and issues that are really important to them. Where we've got the context of things like youth climate strikes and a huge surge of youth action that has really come together in 2019, and so it seemed even more important this year that we bring those young people into the conversation.
I think that the Communicate event is very good because it raises awareness in the people being affected by it, because lots of children are, well, teenagers, are being brought to this event and they're made aware of what is going on around them, and it's actually bad for them, so they can do something about it.
My favourite thing about Communicate Plus is that all these interesting people come in and talk about interesting things, and how you have different views and different opinions to share with everybody.
A lot of sessions running tonight that are bringing together some facilitators from organisations, and some of these are people who are early in their careers and just a few years older than the students themselves, and then we've got right through to people who are very experienced professionals and researchers who've been doing this for several decades, and so kind of really bringing that mix of activity for the students to get involved, to learn about some of the tools and techniques that are used in sharing some of these environmental issues.
I think the most important thing for the environment is making sure it's healthy, and making sure that generations to come will have a good life to live, and will live in a world where they are happy and it's nice.
I'm Danny. I work for Avon Wildlife Trust on a project called Our Bright Future, which is all about engaging young people with being outside in nature. So our goal is to connect up environments and kind of improve biodiversity, make everything bigger, better, more connected. So the Communicate Conference is a great platform for this because they are talking about science and talking about communication, so it's kind of getting that message out there louder and wider.
We have a tendency to underestimate how switched on some of these young people are and how aware of a lot of these issues there are.
My favourite thing about this evening was the fact that I got to put my opinion forward and hear other people's opinions about things that I feel strongly about.
My favourite things about the Communicate so far is probably meeting all the people that have come in to speak, because they're all from really different backgrounds and they all have their own opinions and different things to say, and it's really interesting to hear their opinions on things.
I've learned that we have habits, but we need to break them. If we keep those habits, nothing will ever change.
We're at a time, a unique time in the history of these issues really, of where people are listening, and so it's about making the most of this opportunity and making your voices heard.
probably actually helping other people understand this could be the end of the world one day. If we don't help make a difference, everything that happens leads to another thing. So there is no really more important thing than another.
I don't want to live with the worry that I might not be able to live my life to the fullest because of what people are doing to our climate.
It's what we live on. We live on the earth, and you only get one earth, you only get one chance in life. So you want to make sure that what you live on and what Mother Nature has given to you, you don't want to just ruin it all for your own personal sake.
Gives a bit of a glimpse into some of the real rich ideas that came out at that conference, and again, as George was saying, how insightful and how perceptive the delegates were, and just how much kind of appetite they had to take some agency and make some change. So thanks to George for giving us a bit of an overview of the event, and thanks again to the UE filmmakers who have done a really fantastic job in a very short space of time to get that film together. I'd like to warmly welcome now Jenny Thatcher, who is the Youth and Families Manager at Friends of the Earth England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Jenny has a background in building grassroots activism and leadership, and in particular focusing on supporting young campaigners to find their voice. So Jenny's currently leading Friends of the Earth's youth engagement strategy, which includes a project called My World, My Home, which she's going to tell us a little bit more about. So I'd like to welcome Jenny.